Is that the new Surface Pro? Nope, this is the new ASUS Proart PZ13, a 13-inch Windows tablet with a super battery efficient Snapdragon X Plus processor under the hood. So let's check it out. Hello, my name is Brad. I review tech for creative professionals. A few weeks ago, I reviewed the PX13. Very similar name, very different product. That was one of ASUS's new 360-degree laptop with one of the new AMD processors inside of it. This is a Surface clone with a Snapdragon X Plus processor in it. Now, if you're not caught up on what's happening in the world of microprocessors, totally understand. The Snapdragon is an ARM processor, similar to what you would see in a phone or a tablet. It is designed to be more power efficient for mobile devices. At least that's how the Snapdragon processor line and most ARM processors started off their life. But over time, they've gotten more capable, more powerful, and they can compete with Intel and AMD's laptop processors. So the second question is, why should you care? Well, this processor delivers two things. One, way better battery life. I can go almost all day on this thing compared to the 3 or so hours I get out of a standard laptop. This is similar to the changeover that Apple did a few years ago when they went from using Intel processors to their own M1 processors. And if you saw my latest Surface Pro review just a few months back, you know that the transition to these processors hasn't been entirely seamless for creators, but it's been better than it has been in the past. So let's start by taking a look at what comes in the box with the PZ13. There are actually two boxes in the box, one with the tablet and one with the power supply. The tablet looks like a tablet. The back feels like the same premium aluminum surface that the PX13 body had that I checked out a while ago. This matte black looks really good and it's surprisingly fingerprint resistant. This also comes with a keyboard and case accessory in the box, not an extra purchase like you get with the Surface Pro. This keyboard does attach magnetically along the bottom of the device, and the back cover also attaches magnetically along the, you guessed it, back of the device. That back cover also doubles as a kickstand for the tablet. And that kickstand can prop this up at like a normal laptop height, or you can bend it all the way back and use it like at a slight angle, which is perfect for drawing. Underneath the laptop itself, we got a little box. It has the warranty info and some of the instructions. We also have the USB-C power adapter in that other box. One thing you will not find in this package is the pen. This is a pen-capable device. It uses WPP pens, very similar to the Surface Pro, and you can buy ASUS's version of that pen for about another $100. Now, at first, just looking at the device, it looks like there's only one port on this thing, the USB Type-C port that's also used for charging. But this little plastic piece pops out to reveal yet another USB Type-C port, as well as a full-size SD card slot. They even include an SD to mini converter card in the box. One thing to note though, when your SD card is in the device, the plastic does stick out just a tiny bit, so you can't take that little plastic piece that covers it up nicely and put it on while a card is in the slot. Now, for me, this isn't a huge deal because I'm just taking my card out of my camera, popping it into my laptop, and pulling some video files off and then putting it back in my camera. But if you're one of those people who wanted to use, say, a micro SD card to expand the amount of storage this device has, you're gonna have problems getting that little plastic piece back on if you plan on storing it in here full time. One thing missing from the I/O here is a headphone jack. And I know it's been commonplace for phones and tablets to just get rid of the headphone jack altogether. But if I'm editing video and I wanna be able to just plug in my headphones instead of having to worry about them running out of charge while I'm working, I would prefer just to have a headphone jack there. I don't want to dedicate any more brain space that I need to managing yet another device's power level if I don't have to. We're going to talk about the star of the show next, which is that Snapdragon processor. But before I do, I want to shout out my courses over on bradsartschool.com. Currently, I have Learn to Draw in 60 Days, an Intro to Digital Art. If you'd like to learn more about either of those, check out my website. It's a fun hobby and it's a good place to start. Now, onto that Snapdragon X processor. The battery life here is really good. I'm going to getting twice the charge on this device than I would get like on a normal Windows laptop. And as a plus, it just doesn't get as hot and the fans don't spin up nearly as much. In fact, when I was drawing with it and just using it for daily use, they weren't really spinning up at all. This thing is silent. The other big benefit of this is that it keeps the charge overnight. This is something that I've run into with a lot of Windows laptops that I test. Is I'm working on it one day and then I just leave it overnight. It's asleep, it's doing its thing. Maybe it has a 50% charge, 60% charge. I wake up the next morning and it's dead. Here, I went to bed and this thing was at like 92%, and I woke up, started working the next day, and the battery was at 88%. And that is fantastic. Now, there is a downside to these ARM processors, and that is that not all software is really optimized for it yet. So many of the applications you're going to have to use are going to be emulated. Now, in the past, emulation on Windows was not so great, but Microsoft has really stepped that up this time around, and it's really good. Pretty much any drawing app that you boot up, even if it's not optimized for ARM, is going to work really, really well and perform really well, and you're not even going to notice that it's being emulated. Now, when I did that Surface Pro review at the beginning of the summer, Adobe software is not quite ready for ARM yet. Now, you would think, because of the emulation, that's no big deal, and you'd be right, except Adobe's launcher would just not let you install software unless it's optimized for that device. And so when I tested that Surface Pro, the only thing I could really use was Photoshop and Lightroom. Now, things have improved in the last few months. Adobe Illustrator has a working beta now, so you can download that. You could use that. Premiere Pro, also working on ARM now. Other apps are not, though. If you want to use Adobe Animate, it's not going to work out for you. Adobe After Effects should be coming sometime in the future, but there's no date on that yet. Adobe Fresco, which is what I would have loved to use in the background on this video, I could not, because it's just, they don't have an ARM version and it's not on the roadmap. They don't seem to be working on it. I haven't heard anything about them working on it. And that sort of thing is really frustrating to me, not just because I'm paying $60 a month to use this software, but also because it would work perfectly fine in emulation. They're just choosing not to let you do that. So this is all to say, if you are very heavily reliant on Adobe's Creative Suite, might be a good idea to wait a little bit longer before trying a Snapdragon-based Windows machine. Another thing that could be a problem here are drivers. For example, attaching an external tablet to this drawing tablet might be a problem. Wacom, Huion, XP Pen, currently they don't offer any ARM drivers for their tablets. So attaching one of them and using it with pen pressure and all that fun stuff isn't going to work. So there are some things that still need to be ironed out, but overall, 90% of the things you're going to want to do on this tablet work pretty darn well. I was also impressed with some of the other specs that this came from. Now, this is a little bit more expensive than the base configuration of the Surface Pro, but you get a lot more than the base configuration of the Surface Pro. You still get the same 16 gigabytes of RAM, but you get a full terabyte of storage. They've also managed to pack in a couple higher end features for a pretty decent price. First of all, we have Wi-Fi 7, so if you have a Wi-Fi 7 router, you can take advantage of that. Also, the OLED display. How have I gotten this far without talking about the OLED display? It's beautiful. It's 13.3 inches with a resolution of 2,880 pixels by 1,800 pixels. I don't know what to say about it. It looks fantastic. ASUS does a really good job of putting vibrant wallpapers on their ProArt laptops. So when you get one with one of these OLED screens, it really shines. It really pops. As soon as you boot into Windows for the first time, you're going to see that and go, wow, this looks really good. They've also gone out and color calibrated this, Pantone color calibrated this, in fact, and they've paid a lot of attention to those little details, the kind of details that artists, photographers, creators care about. There's also the ProArt software that has a bunch of like color management features built in. So if your workflow does require you to switch color spaces or modify those spaces on the fly, they have a lot of tools here that are going to allow you to do that. Let's take a look at the detachable keyboard. And when you use it, it's a keyboard. It's fine. It feels good to type on. It is very, very thin. Don't expect a lot of travel. That's probably pretty normal with these kind of keyboards, but it's tactile enough and it feels good. What I do like here is that the trackpad is a nice good size. They managed to expand that. Oftentimes on these tablets, the trackpad ends up becoming really tiny. I mean, it works, but just having something bigger here because they figured out how to fit it is a nice touch. I also noticed while I was unboxing this thing that when I picked up the part that had the keyboard and had the back stand, that it is substantial. It probably weighs almost as much as the tablet itself. The Surface Pro's keyboard is super, super light. So this isn't a big deal, but, you know, something to take account of. They've incorporated smart gestures into the trackpad. They're kind of hard to use, but if you swipe in from the upper corner, brings up settings. There's also a way to adjust volume and brightness right there from the trackpad. And all in all, this is a cool idea. Hope they keep working on it. I think right now, it's a little bit clunky. It's just easier to use the keyboard to change things like the volume and the screen brightness than it is to use this like little functionality, but I like the idea. So let's take a look at this pen and see how it performs. I always like to start by taking a hard brown brush in Photoshop or some other program just to see how my pressure sensitivity works and that sort of thing. See what kind of line I'm gonna get out of this. And this tells me a lot about the pen. Now, first of all, this ASUS pen is a chargeable pen. It's a battery-powered pen. It's got the USB Type-C port right here. That's how you charge it up. It is going to keep its charge for several days, so you don't have to recharge it a lot. But this is a WPP stylus. That is a Windows Pen Protocol stylus. So this is the same exact technology that you're going to see in the Surface Pro. In fact, if I take a Surface Pro pen, I could actually come in here and just start drawing with it. It still works here. But this also means I'm gonna see a lot of the same quirks with this pen that I see with that Surface pen. And I don't have any smoothing on in Photoshop, so if I zoom in, you can see when I was just drawing these lines, some of them were getting, you know, kind of wavy here. And you're gonna see that a lot with this pen. A lot of just organic wave happening there. And what I'm looking for with any pen is how hard is it to get rid of a lot of that wave. So let's test it out a little bit. I am going to keep smoothing off. Let's do some slow angled lines so we can see, yes, there is some jitter here. And that's exactly what I would expect with this pen. And that is what I am getting. Let's zoom in so you can see that. The faster you go with your line, the less jitter you're going to get. Oops. So another thing that's worth talking about here that I've seen on this tablet is something that a lot of these WPP pens do really well is palm rejection. And on this tablet, kind of like the ASUS laptop I reviewed about a month or so ago, the palm rejection is so-so. It's not horrible, but you are going to find yourself occasionally having issues where you saw me zoom out accidentally, or you're going to accidentally select the wrong layer. Now, one of the ways to counteract some of that pen wave is to turn up smoothing. So if I turn it up to like 30%, and I come in here and I start drawing my slow angled lines, you're going to see that they're much, much cleaner. Let me zoom out a little bit. Going to draw another line with a little bit more pressure. There's still a little wobble to that, but it's not nearly as bad, and it definitely makes the pen usable. So one of the problems you do run into when you start using smoothing is that you get a little bit more lag, and it could be kind of hard to match up your lines perfectly. Also, when I start to do fast hatch lines, it becomes harder to kind of make that line match up to this outer edge. That's something that smoothing makes really hard. So you're going to be having to go back and forth. So if I turn smoothing down and I try to fill in this area with my hatch lines, it becomes much easier for me to go from one end to fill up the other end. Another thing that I'm looking for is initial activation rate. That's okay here. If I press very, very lightly, I get a very, very light line. I add more pressure, I get a thicker line. And you could see that the pressure curve does cut out at those lower angles, or at those lower levels. But I don't think that's too bad because I was drawing very lightly there. So overall, I think this pen is okay, but I think there is better stuff out there. If you're going to be doing a lot of line art, this sort of thing might frustrate you. If you don't worry so much about line art, you probably are going to find this pen to be very usable. If you want a pen to use for photography, retouching, handwriting, this pen is going to work really, really well. It's really in that line art, and in fact, a lot of the stuff I do, where it gets a little bit frustrating, and I would rather use something else because it just organically performs better without me having to play around with the line smoothing as much. So there's been a lot of Surface Pro clones over the last several years, and all of them seem to have their deficiencies. Some are just underpowered, some of them just have a really awful pen. Nobody's really nailed it yet, and I think this comes the closest to actually beating out the Surface. But really, if we put them next to each other, they're kind of the same device. You have the same processor, you have the same form factor, you just have the same kind of keyboard, you have the same dang pen technology. The one difference here is the price, and I think that's where this really beats out the Surface Pro. I think if you just look at it on paper, hey, the Surface Pro starts at $1,000, this starts at $1,100. This doesn't look as good of a deal at first, but it actually is. First of all, this comes with a keyboard. You can get a Surface Pro keyboard, like a cheap one, for $140. However, you probably don't want to do that because if you're looking at this for illustration, you're going to need the pen charger. The only way to charge the Surface Pro Slid Pen is by using a keyboard. So you're going to have to get the more expensive $180 keyboard. So right there, you're paying $80 more than you would for this device. On top of that, the Surface Pro, it comes with 16 gigabytes of RAM, same as this, but that base configuration only has 256 gigabytes of storage. And this is where Microsoft really needles you. If you want to jump up, double that storage, add another 256 gigabytes, go up to 500 gigabytes of storage, $200 more. $200 more. It's insane. The other thing is when I was configuring my Surface Pro, I was having a hard time buying that $99 one. I just wanted to review it, and I wanted the cheapest one I could get. I couldn't get that configuration because they just weren't selling it at the time. And as I was going through the little product picker, they're still not really doing that. As soon as you choose the color, it bumps you up to that $1,200 model. So really, you're going to get more storage. You're going to get the more expensive configuration anyway, and you're still getting half the storage that you get here because you have a full gigabyte. So from a value standpoint, I think what ASUS is doing here with the OLED screen, with this form factor, with the keyboard case included, is just a better value than what Microsoft is offering. The real question comes down to this pen and whether you can get by with a WPP pen or if you just need the accuracy and the lack of wiggle and wave that you find in this pen and something you might find in like an S Pen. And then there is, of course, whether you're using Adobe or whether you're using some other software like Clip Studio works really well here. Krita works really well here. So there's just a lot of things you have to weigh to decide whether this is the right device for you. But what do you think? Let me know down below in the comments. Thank you all for watching, and I'll talk to you in a couple of days.